Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those who are expecting another voiceover analysing an aspect of writing, I will be doing some more of those, so you won't have to look at me on some of the videos. However, I'm recording this one ahead of time because when this one airs, I will currently be away at an event at a writing convention. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, the importance of conventions and what I got from them coming up before I was represented by an agent and before I had a publisher, and how useful they can be, and you should try and find some in your area. That's what I'm going to focus on today. Not to do myself out of a job, but as important as writing channels are and finding information is online, there's nothing like going and meeting someone in person, talking to them and finding out things that they won't perhaps say on video, or that they're just in a more relaxed environment and you can ask questions and get some good back and forth. So before I was represented by my literary agent, I was looking to understand more about publishing. And yes, videos like this one and other ones weren't available then, and they are now, but I still get stuff from going to conventions at this stage of my career. And I think for those who are looking to get into becoming self-published or traditionally published, I think it is an important aspect. The face-to-face, the interaction, and these days being a writer and being completely nameless and faceless and not having any interaction with your audience is really uncommon. So I think it's important to have that and to build up your interpersonal skills. Now, I know some writers struggle with anxiety and being in groups and all this sort of thing, and believe it or not, I don't like it. I don't like being in front of a camera. I hate having my photo taken, and I hate public speaking. It's just something I'm not really comfortable at doing. But over the course of many years, I've essentially built up a callus and I've become better at it, or at least better at faking that I'm good at it and that I enjoy it. I love talking to people. I love talking one-on-one, but sitting in front of an audience of people and just talking about something, I just don't find it very, very pleasant. It's just not something that I would volunteer to do because I'm not naturally an extrovert. Talking about my own material, that's quite easy because it's not talking about myself. But if people start asking me personal questions, that's totally different, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. Like celebrity behind the scenes, follow them day-to-day shows, those kind of things don't interest me. And if someone said, oh, can we make one about you? I'll be absolutely not, because I'm actually quite a private person. I've strayed a little from the topic, so back on subject. When I was coming up and trying to get an agent, I would attend local events in the UK. These are regular annual events that we have. So there's one around Easter called EasterCon, very original, and there's the sort of British Fantasy Society convention, which is called FantasyCon. That's around September time. There are other ones. There are the large expos, the big sort of San Diego Comic Cons. We have the equivalent over here in the UK. Obviously, they're a lot smaller, and you have film stars, TV stars, anime, comic book writers and artists, and also novelists. And we're usually kind of B, C, D, E list that people are coming to see, primarily other people, and we're there as a nice to see, And so going along to that kind of thing can be interesting, is good for exposure, but as someone who was just trying to get into the business, I didn't find that nearly as useful as going to the smaller conventions that are just purely focused on writing, books, authors, where editors would attend, where agents would attend. And I would go to these panels and I was trying to glean as much information as I could from all of these people, listening very closely to what editors were saying, not just the sort of thing that they were interested in, because that would change over time, but the way they spoke about the industry, the way they spoke about books and how it works with lists at a publisher and different times of the year. Are there some that are better than the others? And how does it work with books that, if you have two books, they're very, very similar? What happens with that? How long does it take for a book from when it's picked up with an agent to when it comes out on the shelf? What are the different stages of the editing process? Before all of this information was as easily available as it is online, I got it through this. You can look in books, and I would, at this old-fashioned thing called the library. I would go and read books there and try and find information, but it wasn't as much as I would get from going to these events. And there were agents on panels too. John Jarrold is a very famous agent in the UK. He has some very, very big clients. And before that, he was a publisher. So he knows science fiction and fantasy. He's run an imprint in the past. So I would listen very closely to what he would say. If there are any events in your area or that you can get to, or some of them now have an online function where you pay a reduced rate for a ticket, but you can watch all of the panels and you can even ask questions online through the chat box. Something like, if you can't physically go for monetary reasons or distance or disability or any other reasons, or you're not comfortable in crowds, see if you can get on some of these events, you know, that are focused on your genre. Now, science fiction and fantasy have many ones throughout the year in UK, US, Canada, and Europe and other places. If there's some that are local to you, you can get to in person, that's even better. Finding your tribe online these days is a lot easier than it used to be. But if you can go to an event and you meet people who are in the same position as you, they're trying to find an agent, they're on their first book or second book and they're struggling with rejections and all this kind of thing, and you can make a connection with people face to face first before you then carry on your kind of friendship online, that's fantastic. It was really useful to me because at that stage I would write a book, send it out, get rejected, get almost no feedback and just be thinking, oh, am I doing something wrong? What's going on? I'd go to these events, I'd see other people in the audience in the same position as me, they'd listen to the panels, they'd get the feedback from agents and editors saying what they're looking for and what they're not looking for. And I made some friends that I'm still in contact with today. Some of them have become authors, some of them have gone into the publishing business and now editors. Some of them gave up because they were just struggling and they didn't want to carry on, or it wasn't right for them. Some have gone into self-publishing, some are traditionally published. It really depends. So as well as the information side, it was really useful for the social side, for building up a network of friends, but also contacts and getting my name and my face familiar to people within that genre, within that space. Editors and agents would see me at this event. They're not obviously going to always remember me. There's hundreds of people at the smaller events, thousands at some of the other ones, but I'd be a person at this thing. And if you keep turning up enough times, someone's going to remember you. And, you know, if you're asking questions that are logical, sensible, useful, interesting, that's good. Outside of panels, most people are fairly approachable in the right circumstances. I've heard horror stories of people being approached whilst they're stood at urinal and people are coming up and asking questions. Obviously, there are places that are offline. But if someone's relaxing in the bar, sat having a cup of coffee, can you have 5 minutes of their time? Can you drop them an email about something? You know, for every video that I do, I know that there are 100 questions that people haven't asked, don't want to ask, can't ask, haven't thought of at that moment. If you can go and do it in person and have a conversation for 10 minutes with someone, that can be far more useful than just waiting for the right video to come up, scrolling through Google. If you can sit down with the expert in your area, editor, agent, publisher, whatever it might be, publicist, and say, how does this work? How does that work? That can be really useful. You know, can I buy you a cup of coffee? You know, I want to ask you some questions about your area. You know, most people are pretty cool about that. Evenings at conventions, in the bar, people are a lot more relaxed, they chat, they socialise, and you'll hear conversations between other groups. I'm not saying you stand and eavesdrop, but some will be willing for you to come and join their kind of circle and listen, and you can just observe groups of editors talking, agents, groups of authors talking about how things work. That's really useful. For every video that I do explaining how the industry works, I know there are a lot of people that still just don't accept it, they don't want to. I get weird comments saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, even though I've been in the business of being a traditionally published author for several contracts and for quite a few years now. Go to these events, listen to how people talk about it, and you'll find out for yourself firsthand. If you don't want to trust anybody else, you don't believe anybody else, you'll hear exactly how the business is, that it is a tough business, whether you're self-published or traditionally published. And yes, traditional publishing is slow and all this kind of thing. We gripe about it too. Authors talk about it amongst themselves and say the problems and the pros and the cons. We talk about all this kind of stuff. And you'll hear it from them, from us at these events. So making contacts, getting first-hand information for yourself, getting an experience and learning a bit more about how the industry works from the people who are in it day to day. And that's absolutely critical, because if you then go to the next stage and you get a literary agent and you get that first book deal, all the panels that I went to about debut authors talking about, we've got our first book out, you know, it's gone great, and now what? Oh, I've got to do the next one, and how does that work, and what's the thing, and what's the next stage? There's the huge rush to get a literary agent. That's the biggest barrier, probably, I would say. You know, get that literary agent, and you're going and going and going, and trying and trying, and then, you know, the next huge hurdle is to get a book deal. Some authors get an agent for years, send out books, for whatever reason it doesn't work. Second, third, fourth book they're on attempt with a literary agent gets them that first book deal. And it's fantastic and it's great. But then you've got to do the next book and the next book and the next book. And this is the kind of thing that people don't always realise. There's no end point. There's no kind of final goal. If all you wanted to do was to put one book out and walk away and you've done that, great. I actually want to build up a body of work. I want to be able to write full time. That's my end goal. But equally, my actual next goal is the next book I'm writing and the next book I'm writing. So there's always something else to do. There's always something to reach for. I'm not saying, oh, and then I want a TV deal, and I want a film deal, and I want to buy a speedboat. And, you know, that's if you want to go for that, great. But you're probably better off buying a lottery ticket because it's as better odds, I would say, than being an author as a way to get rich. So let's say you get an agent and you get your first book deal. Now you're in an unusual club again, and there'll be other people at the same stage as you that then have to work on the second book or their second deal if they had like a trilogy or a duology or something to begin. And how does that work? So going to these events, even as a published author, is really useful because you can sit in these circles of people who are at exactly the same stage as you, or for those who've just gone to the next stage already, and you can ask them questions and say, okay, I've done my first book deal. We're getting ready to talk about the second one. How does it work? What's the next stage? Like I had a question that I just did a video short on, was someone saying, say you got your first book deal and you have your book. What happens with the second book? How does it work? Who do you talk to first? Do I write it or do I pitch it to my agent? So I've answered that one in another video. So things like that, people aren't always aware how it works, but you've got the experts right there. You're part of the club with other authors in that stage, and you can go and talk to them. Also, finding out about books online is brilliant. Booktubers do a fantastic job and they're amazing. If you go to a panel and there's 3 authors that you don't really know and one that you're interested in, and that's why you've gone to the panel, and you listen to it, and then you find out these other people are actually, they're quite charming and they're quite interesting, and that book actually sounds really quite cool. Then they've got a new follower, they've got a new reader from someone that they weren't expecting to get. And as an author, that's fantastic. The idea is we want more readers, we want more people to be interested in our work. And as much as I said I don't like it, I understand that part of the aspect of whether the decision people will buy a book or not comes down to the individual. If someone is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a lot of people will just not buy their book, sight unseen, no matter how good it is. Some people don't care. They don't follow any of the stuff online. They just walk into a bookshop, look at the back of the book, pick it up and walk away. But obviously younger generations, that's a lot more important to them. That's a lot more of a deciding factor in addition to actually what the story is about. So it's great at the next stage of your career to go to events to build a following. There again, it's people I've met or one-on-one, and you build up a tribe and you build up followers, and people then come from in person to following you on social media, on your website, on your newsletter, whatever it might be. And then you see them at the next event and you remember them and have a chat and talk about things and sign books. And it's really, really useful for that stage. The other thing to remember is that some agents are not in the same country as their clients, but some of the bigger events they will go to in person. Worldcon is an annual science fiction and fantasy event that moves around the world. So 2022 it was in Chicago, 2023 I think it's in China, and 2024 it's in Glasgow, Scotland. And that will attract an audience from around the world. Obviously Americans will be coming over here in 2024, lots of people from the UK will go. So authors who've never met their agent will suddenly have a chance at some of these big events. They've never met their actual editor in person, but some of them will go to these events too. So it's really useful again for that personal aspect of building up that connection and that interpersonal relationship with people that you probably only met and spoken to online. And that's really useful too at the next stage of your career. But also remember, authors move around. You go from agent to agent. Sometimes agents retire, agents move on, agents go into a different job, but also you don't always stay with the same publisher. So as an author, you go along, you meet other editors, you meet other publishers, and you chat to them and find out what kind of a person they are like. And then if one contract ends with one publisher and another one offers you a deal and you've met that person, you remember what they're like and you're thinking, that'd be someone I'd quite like to work with. you know, it's not just about the book deal anymore. It's not just about, I've got these 3 publishers and they're all offering me a deal. Well, which one do I go with? The one with the most money. It's not always the most important. It's who's going to understand what I'm trying to do, who just wants to bang the book out and doesn't really want to put that much time and effort into the editing process or the promotion. Who do I think I could get on with who's on the same wavelength of me? Having spent an evening with so-and-so in the bar and we chatted and we had this, this and this in common, they understand my kind of touchstones as a writer and a creator. They understand where I'm coming from. They might not be completely on the same wavelength, but they understand what I'm trying to achieve. And therefore, if you give them a manuscript and you say, this is what I'm trying to do with it, this is what I think it's about, and they come back and say, right, I understand what you're trying to do, these are the ways I think you can improve it and still keep it within that vision. That's how a good editorial process works. Not, okay, this is what your vision is, I'm going to take it off over here. That's when, if you've never met the person before, you've never spoken to them, it's really difficult. And you don't always get to choose your editor or your publisher when you first start out, of course, but later on in your career, that kind of thing can be really helpful. Writing, by its very nature, is quite a solitary process. You spend a lot of time sat in your room by yourself on a keyboard, banging away, writing a book. So going to these events is just wonderful for the social side as well. You know, making contacts and all that kind of thing, but being around people who get exactly what you're on about. I talk to my friends and family about writing and characters and world building, and after a while their eyes just kind of glaze over because they're a bit bored. They don't really get it. They sympathise, and if I'm having problems or issues and stuff, then, you know, they're there for support. But after a while they're just like, oh, right, okay, you're still going on about that thing, are you? Can you not let it go? Sometimes I just can't. I can't let it go. But you talk to some other writers or agents or editors and they're like, oh God, that thing's so annoying, or whatever it might be. That is brilliant. It's so good. It's being around people who know exactly the thing that you're going through, the struggles, and there again, you can see people further down the line and say, right, how does that work? How does this work? Ask them questions. And they're all really open. So every stage of my career as being a writer, before I had an agent, before I had a publisher, I have one now, I find it really useful. Not just for the growing my audience, getting new readers, hopefully getting more sales. It's building contacts, building friendships, finding out what's going on, looking at changes in the industry, talking to people now and saying, right, what's going on? Are bigger books becoming more popular? Do they want shorter series? I still go to panels and I listen to agents and editors, and someone will say, you know, where do you think fantasy's going? Are we going to have a lot more grimdark books or something? And someone might say, given what we've had the last 2 years, the pandemic, I think people are going to be turned off the darker material. We'll have less of that. That's one theory someone might throw out. And you might be thinking, actually, I've got a book that's really upbeat and really exciting, uplifting. That might be what agents are currently looking for in the next year. Right, once so-and-so opens up, I can talk to them and say, I heard so-and-so talk about this at this panel. My book follows these themes, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's really, really useful. I'm not saying you're going to be able to predict what's coming up, but it's good to have that insider knowledge in a way, and the best way you're going to get it is from going to these sort of events or attending them online if you can. So, whilst this video airs, I'm currently in Chicago at Capricorn, attending my first American convention in many, many years, and my first convention as an author. So I'm going to be meeting fans, doing a signing, doing a reading, doing some panels, and having hopefully a great time at Chicago, my first time to the city, so I'm really looking forward to that. Hopefully this video has been useful. Look around, see what's going on, see if there's any events in your area or that you can get to online and attend, if at all possible. That's all I'm going to talk about today. I'll be back next week with another video.